Turn to the next session. Plant-based foods must be both healthy and sustainable and taste good. And we will start with the tasting good, right? Another keynote speakers to hear today is food communicator and chef Bille Nielsen, talking about sensory success factors in plant-based food and how to optimize flavor and texture with simple culinary techniques. We are looking very much forward, Christine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to talk at this conference about plant-based food. My name is Bille Nielsen, and even though I hold a bachelor in nutrition and health, I'm going to speak to you as a chef. And as I could hear from some of the speeches earlier, I think somebody's reaching out for some of the things that chefs could contribute to the plant-based world of food. Chefs are not like super tasters that we normally use in food industry, but chefs are persons who have a very long experience of tasting a large variety of foods and food in many different kinds of combinations, and what the food, what it means to the taste for the food, the method of cooking, and so on. We are also very creative, full of ideas, and very open to new flavors and tastes and methods. And we're not all hysterical divas, just saying, reach out for chefs. We would like to participate to this thing that is going out now that is so incredible. I mean, this is the biggest paradigm shift in culinary history, actually, since we started to eat that much meat that led us to this situation here where we have to eat more plants. But anyhow, I think it's going to be great, and I think that everybody here would like to contribute the best they can to make this really, really good. I must admit that I'm a person who eat very satisfying, wonderful tasting, yummy, plant-based food whenever I like, because I have the skills to do it. And this is why I eat very little processed food. So I had to do a little bit of research before this speech. This is a postcard from my holiday where I was in a burger chain. I don't want to give any names, not to offend anybody. But I was actually, it was quite interesting for me that this burger was pretty close to what I remember that the burger, with the meat burger is. Even the sad aftertaste of low-quality meat, they have been succeed to imitate. And I was really asking why. I asked a colleague of mine, why, because I was thinking I could come up with 10 different things to flavor this burger with to make it significantly taste better. And I asked one of my colleagues, why didn't they use any chefs in the process here? And she said, but they did. The question is just what they were asked to create. We have to remember that. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about which kind of things I could have been adding to this burger to make it taste significantly better. And I think that most of you already know a lot of the background about tasting and so on. So, and due to the limited of time, so I have to find some pinpoints. But among all the typically sensory success factors is texture, taste, mouthfeel, aroma, and this spicy feeling that is actually more a feeling than a real taste. Scent, appearance, sound, and I write also naming, even though it's not really a sensory success, but it has something to do with the expectations you have to the food that you're going to eat in a minute. And if there is no connection to these two, sometimes you will think that the food is better than it actually is. I'll talk first about the texture. The biggest challenge about plant-based food is that it tends to be a little bit on the soft side, because most of it has to be cooked first. For instance, legumes and grains and so on. Of course, we can always balance that with crunchy ingredients in the overall meal, like raw vegetables, nut kernels, things like that, seeds. But there will always be this little problem that we don't really activate the molar teeth and the muscles in the cheeks. This is these things that meat lovers or people who are used to eat meat tend to miss when they are introduced to plant-based food. Um, and this is some of a challenge. I mean, some of the patties and meat alternatives and so on, they're still a little bit on the soft side. In nature, in my kitchens, I use some of the things that, for instance, whole peas. Many of the old varieties sorts have this little bit hard shell that you need to chew on. The same thing with whole fava beans. Soybean, that is, this is wrong that it's mentioned here because it's very difficult to cook in normal kitchens. Lupins is something I taste lately. It's a little bit gummy. Then there's the shiitake and king oyster mushrooms, and something so strange as cauliflower stems. But I collect everything every time I hear or I try something that gives this resistant when I chew. I collect them, and also the Savoy cabbage actually, so simple. And we have to talk about taste, of course, and what we always talk a lot about is umami, because the plant stew itself usually have the lack of umami, and if we have to make people love plant-based food, we have to season it or cook it in a way that we cultivate a lot of umami. The way to cultivate is mostly by heat and time. Some of the raw materials where you find where you can cultivate umami just by cooking, I mean just by heat, is things like tomatoes, mushrooms, peas, and asparagus. I think tomatoes, this is one of the things that everyone in the world like Italian food because of all the tomatoes. Thyme, I've mentioned, for instance, soy sauce and miso, and it's because it's these fermented things that is added. We take things that is almost neutral in taste, like legume, and we have the kochi starter culture made of barley or rice. Both things almost neutral in taste, but by fermentation we get some of the most umami rich ingredients in the world. It's quite amazing. Just by time. It's very, very simple. I've been writing also umami sauces because right now I see startups who are making other kinds of, not exactly, it's not, they don't use koji starter, but they use many other kind of starter culture to make the same kind of different kinds of umami sauces, which is, I think, very important when you, for instance, cook vegetables. We have to, when we talk about plants and so on, it's not all about getting something that is similar to meat. I mean, the world of plant is, I mean, vegetables. We are going to eat lots of vegetables. This is what makes the meal interesting, right? So flavoring the vegetables, for instance, but also plant patties and so on with the miso or these umami sauces makes a very big change. We also have simple things like dry mushrooms and sun-dried tomatoes, and over here is, for instance, like kelp, toasted sesame seeds, tahini, peanut butter, things like that, yeast, and so on. That gives a lot of umami to the food. And the interesting thing about many of these additives is actually that they are very protein rich in itself. And the thing is that we eat very little of it because it's very rich in taste. Also, some of them are also pretty salt. But the thing is that we can, in a meal, you can use a little of that and a little of that and a little of that, and altogether these little portions of protein actually makes a difference. And I know because I've been calculating so many meals. It does make a difference also in realistic amounts like teaspoons or tablespoons. There is also, of course, the other basic tastes, and again, we cannot dwell too long with it. But the sweetness we can, of course, add. But very often, when you cook vegetables, for instance, they are already unfolding some sweetness. So sometimes it's not really necessary. Acidity refreshes and balances mostly, for instance, dishes with legume that tend to be a little bit dusty. Then acidity can make miracles. Salt is, of course, always important and make all the other flavors taste of more. But we also have to be a little bit careful not to use too much salt. So usually I do flavor with all the other ingredients first, especially the umami ingredients, and then salt in the end, so that it doesn't end up being too salt altogether. And now I'm going to talk about the bitter. And I think maybe this is going to be the most important thing I'm going to talk about today. Because it tends to be like that. I noticed that when people are introduced to something plant-based, they are very, very quickly, if there is just the tiniest bit of bitterness, then they are totally off. And this is really funny because when you think about it, some of the kind of food and drinks that we cherish the most are bitter. I mean, coffee, tea, chocolate, cocoa, rye bread, liver pastry, olives. And in the neighborhood where I live, people with big beard and lumped shirt, they can't get their IPAs bitter and hoppy enough. So why whining about just a little bitterness in the food? I would like to reveal a thing for you, a secret for chefs. We have a special warm place for bitter ingredients, bitter vegetables. And you know why? Because it needs extra skills. It needs extra love to tame the bitterness and to make it into something really wonderful. And the way we do it is by cooking. If we cook something that is bitter, it unfolds a lot of sweetness normally. And we season it with, this is very important, a lot of umami-rich ingredients. And suddenly, it unfolds a lot of other flavors. That is, I mean, it's a gift. It's a gift at any meal, and we would miss it if it wasn't there. So I think we should talk the bitterness up a little bit. We shouldn't talk about all the time that we have to remove it, and it's a bit obstacle to novel foods. And so I know that some of it is not edible in the bitterness. But in the other hand, we don't have to pamper people all the time. It's not everybody that wants something sweet and soft. Somebody also like to be, kicked in. For me, I eat bitter things. I love Campari and all kind of bitter things, because for me, it's a little bit like eating spicy things. I mean, really spicy things, chili and so on. I mean, it really gives you a kick in some way. So try to open up to the world of bitterness. Don't be afraid. Another thing I'll talk about is the mouthfeel. That is very important too, and I heard somebody else talk about it. And this is, we talk too little about onions. Sorting onions is something, it's quite incredible when you think about it. All over the globe, people in the same time zone about dinner time do the exactly same thing. They are sorting onions for casseroles, soups, wonderful stews, sauces, and so on. And there's a lot of secret taste and flavor hidden in this process. I think about 50% of all recipes start with this process. We talk a little too about it, a little too little. The thing is, in plant-based food, this is so important to get this very, very satisfying mouthfeel. And the thing is that when you put the onions, they are like raw and a little sharp and eye-watering in the beginning. And nobody would just add them to a sauce in the middle of the process. It's always here in the beginning. And if you give yourself the time and patience and care, it takes between 10 to 15 minutes. Then suddenly the onions change from sharp to an eye-watering to mouth-watering. And you can actually enrich many plant-based dishes just by paying more attention to this. I did it the other day. I added lentils and I cooked it another 15 minutes. I made a cream out of it. I seasoned it only with salt and pepper, and it was almost taste like, you don't believe it, meat. Just because I was careful about this process. Now, here are 3 approaches to plant-based food that is easy to compare. I don't want to put any names. Nobody mentioned, nobody forgotten, nobody offended. But the first one is what I call the high-tech plant beef. It's made from extruded legume normally and starch and so on. The extruded legume I tasted lately. It was like I've never had anything in my mouth that was completely without any kind of flavor. It was like having a cold and you can't taste anything. And I was asking this guy who was making all the aromas that they add afterwards, and I asked why did you remove all the flavor of? Because he told me that it was peas and fava beans, and he said it's because they had to remove all the ugly flavor. And I was just, what? Because to me, peas and fava beans, they taste really, really good. What's the problem? Maybe they chose the wrong ones. I don't know, but I think it could be really, really interesting in the future to work with this kind of food, but adding a little bit more of natural born flavor to it. And then also to add some more natural tastes to it. It's also, it have cost tremendous lot of money to make some of these different kinds. Crazy. But it's still, I think maybe in the long run, it's because it can also be cheaper to buy, but still it's very expensive. Then there's the funky burger. I call it funky. It's the nice fermented product in many kinds. I think we have much to look for here, because the genius thing about this is that they use raw materials, they add a starter culture, and then by time the texture cultivates in, and including a lot of umami. It's fantastic. The first one I tasted was beautiful. The last one we have to talk about is the homemade burger, because the thing is that it is a reality to a lot of people. It's very difficult, I think. This is the biggest challenge of our changing our food culture, that people don't have skills to make this at home. Parents can't pass it on to their kids because they haven't made it themselves. So this is why, as a food communicator, is very, very busy these years, because people have to learn this. And it's maybe not so, there's a lot of normal consumers who prefer some of the other products. But the thing is that the public kitchens, we say popular, they make 1 million meals a day. They don't have budget to buy the high-tech plant beef or the funky beef. They are still doing the homemade burger. Large scale, large kitchens, they are still doing this from scratch. They are soaking legumes. They are boiling everything. They are cutting the vegetables, many of them still. Maybe they should be helped a little bit in the future. But I'm not sure that it has to be these other things that are too expensive. This one is my homemade burger. It's nutritious. There's 30 grams of protein in it because I took a little of that, and it has a very high protein quality also because I chose the one that was fit very well to each other. And it tastes really, really good. The problem is that it needs these cooking skills, but luckily, politicians understand the needs for educating and upgrading food professionals in learning these things. But I think we could maybe think of something that we could help them in some way with future food. Because I think we talk a lot about meat substitutes. But we could also think in a completely different way. I mean, the first cars, they were designed like horse carriages. Who would ever think about a Tesla Model X 100 years ago? But maybe we have to think also in another way. Maybe we don't need that thing that you can grab from a plastic tray and put on the plate, and you can cook it in a very short time, and it tastes wonderful, scent very good, and it has all the protein and taste and everything like meat. Maybe we have to make something else. I don't know. I don't have any ideas. I mean, I eat it every day. Different components of different kind of things. It's not something with something. It's many different things. In this way, I get plenty of protein. And the thing is also, to my knowledge, there's no studies showing that there is a protein efficiency in plant-based plant-eating adult persons in the Western world. So maybe we talk a lot about this protein, and we talk about these green proteins and so on, but do we really need it? I mean, we have already the food that can provide us with all the proteins we need, also eating plants. And this is why I think we should also ask why a lot. I showed you the mushrooms when we talked about texture. The mushrooms were also when we talked about taste. And this is why I think, as a really old school chef, why take the good mushroom and do a lot of things with it in a factory and comes out as something that is not a mushroom, but it was so good before? I think we have to ask ourselves a lot of whys. And this is why I hear also very often with things that taste so, novel foods that taste so bad, so we cannot find out anything else they're too useful for than protein bars. But I don't think the world needs any more protein bars. And the thing is always they are wrapped up in dried food and nuts and cocoa. But I mean, cocoa and nuts are full of proteins already, but they taste just really, really good. So why add something and waste our very good appetite that we could have delicious plant meals for dinner? And new technology with well-proven sensory success factors, because they are tested and tried. Still use, don't forget the onions. If everything else fails, go back to well-known successes. We still have a fantastic point of departure, for instance, by the good old rice and beans that most people live up in this world. Thank you.